We need to talk some more about these cuts from the Department of Education because I suspect that people still aren't really understanding. First, if you're new here, my name is Holly. I am a writer and content creator. I am a former high school science educator, and I have a lot of experience working with children in special education, and also my own two kids both have IEPs. Trust me when I say I'm very well versed in this stuff. USA Today put out a pretty good article that I encourage everybody to read. I'm going to put a screenshot of the title up here. They talked to several different families who have children in special education. One of the things that really stood out to me is that it came up more than once in this article where family had their kids in the wealthiest school districts of the state, had their kids in schools that supposedly were ranked the best. They still had a lot of difficulty making sure that their kids were receiving the services and accommodations that they needed. Editing Holly here. None of this is meant as a dig or a diss at the teachers themselves. The vast majority of teachers want to do right by these students, but are often put in impossible situations with impossible workloads. What I'm talking about here are large systemic issues, not the teachers themselves. Thank you, teachers. And this is something that my family has experienced also firsthand. We have actually lived in quite a few different states. Some places were better than others. Some places within a state were better than others. But there's never been any particular instance where I was like, oh man, this school, they totally have it down. They're nailing this. A lot of times people will say things like, well, if you're not happy with the school that your child's at, send them to another school. Move so that you're in a different school district. But these are stories where the people were already living in areas that were wealthy, and so therefore you would think would have more resources, areas that were already ranked well for services, and yet they are still having these issues. Not to mention, obviously, not everybody can just pack up and move. The Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services is the office within the Education Department that is in charge of making sure states are in compliance with IDEA. And last week, 121 people were dismissed. And there were also several other people fired in other parts of the Education Department, including offices that basically hear disability complaints and help make sure that civil rights laws are being enforced. Now, to be fair, here is a statement from the Education Secretary, Linda McMahon, saying that this does not affect funding. But if you only have a handful of people on staff making sure that the states are in compliance, even if the money is still available to them, there's no guarantee that the states are using it appropriately and that they have the right programs in place and that they're hiring the right people and they're training the right people and that kids are getting the free and appropriate education that they are entitled to by law. Only 19 states are totally in compliance. The rest need assistance at some level. Many of those states actually have been judged for more than 2 years in a row to not be in compliance. I think this quote from this mother, Courtney Hansen, really sums up the situation and why it's not as easy as simply moving or asking your child to be transferred to a different school. And she said, we actually have a pretty good experience. And when I say a pretty good experience, that still means that every day I'm putting out very small fires. I don't think people understand the time, effort, and sometimes money it takes to ensure that your child's IEP is being enforced. If you don't have a child that has gone through this process, then you probably have no idea. The process simply just to get your child evaluated by the school to see if they qualify for an IEP itself can take several weeks, sometimes months. Legally, they're supposed to do it within a certain amount of time, but a lot of times schools have a large backlog of cases they have to work through, so sometimes those deadlines aren't made. The parents usually have to also spend time doing a variety of different tasks for the child to be evaluated, and that can be anything from various questionnaires, some of which have hundreds of questions. Sometimes there's an interview portion where you have to sit down with a school psychologist. Again, that can take hours. Not to mention the meetings themselves. There's pre-meetings before the child's evaluated. There's the actual meeting to determine whether they're eligible or not, and then there's yearly meetings. And then sometimes, of course, if things aren't going well, there's other meetings that you have to have in the meantime. And so all of this can affect a parent's stress levels, first of all, but also time and money because you're missing work for this sort of stuff. In fact, there's one parent in this story that says they wish they could work. They are so busy advocating for their child that it is not possible for them to actually work. I have been in that situation, and that was difficult for us. We made it happen. We were privileged enough that we could make it happen, but it was not easy. So yes, it is technically true that as of right now, nothing has happened to funding. Yes, it is technically true that nothing has changed with the actual law, but when you already had only 19 states meeting requirements, there's a big problem. And yes, you can make the argument that, well, when we give the money and all of the oversight directly to the states, they know better what they need, they can shuffle the resources around as they see fit, and maybe, at least in some states, maybe that's how it'll be. But there's certainly no guarantee. And again, it's not as simple as, well, you're not happy with the way that your state's implementing it, so move to a different state, move to a state that's doing it better. That's not how life works. What I really worry about personally are the families that don't have parents that are available to do all of the advocating and to help the schools help their child. I saw firsthand when I taught myself that those are often the kids that fall through the cracks. And I think it's just so hypocritical coming from an administration that said this.
And these are kids who will never pay taxes. They'll never hold a job. They'll never play baseball. They'll never write a poem. They'll never go out on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted.
If you cut oversight for IDEA compliance, you can expect a lot more kids to not grow the skills that they need to be a tax-contributing member of society. Anyway, that's what I'm thinking about today. Hope everybody else is having a more pleasant Monday. Bye!